The school doors buzzed with the sound of morning announcements and teenage chatter. But when an old black man stepped through carrying an American flag, everything stopped. Dressed in his crisp Marine uniform, one arm paralyzed at his side, his medal still gleamed with honor. He came to see his daughter, but before he could step into the gym, 4 security guards seized him by the neck, rough, dismissive, treating him like a threat, not a hero. They didn't ask his name. They only saw his skin. Then, from the crowd, an old police officer stepped forward, his eyes wide, voice trembling. "Do you know who this man is?" he demanded. "He's the reason we even get to stand here free. He bled for this country while you were learning to tie your shoes." And in that frozen moment, the truth silenced the room. The school hall echoed with footsteps and muffled laughter as students filled the gym for a special assembly. But the moment the doors opened and an old black man stepped inside holding an American flag, the atmosphere changed. His uniform, though worn at the edges, was pristine, and the glint of his 4-star insignia caught the overhead lights. His left arm hung motionless by his side, paralyzed from service, but he held that flag high with his right hand, each step steady, filled with quiet pride. He came for one reason, to surprise his daughter, a top student being honored on stage today. But before he could take 5 steps in, 4 security guards rushed him. "Hey, you can't be in here," one barked, grabbing the man by the collar. Another reached for his flag, trying to rip it away. They didn't ask questions. They didn't see the medals on his chest or the pain in his eyes. They just saw a black man in uniform and made a judgment. Rough hands shoved him back against the wall, one guard wrapping an arm around his neck. The students stared. Some gasped, some pulled out phones. No one moved, until a deep voice cut through the chaos. "Let him go. Now." The crowd turned to see an old police officer stepping forward, his badge glinting under the hallway lights, his voice firm and commanding. He walked with a limp, eyes locked on the struggling veteran. "Do you even know who this man is?" The officer snapped, stepping between the guards. "He's a 4-star Marine general. He fought for this country while you were still in diapers. That arm, he lost it protecting men like you. That flag, he earned it." Silence fell over the crowd. The guards froze. One stammered, We didn't know." The officer turned, helping the old man stand straight again. "You didn't ask." Students slowly began to clap, softly at first, then louder, rising into a roar. The daughter, sitting in the front row, burst into tears when she saw him. She ran across the gym, wrapping her arms around him. The flag, still in his hand, fluttered gently beside them. And in that moment, the shame of ignorance was replaced by the pride of recognition. The assembly didn't begin with the principal's speech that day. It began with a standing ovation for a man who gave everything, only to be almost turned away from the one place he most deserved to be. He didn't come to cause trouble. He didn't come to make a scene. He came to see his daughter smile. The old black man stepped onto the school grounds with a slow, measured gait, his Marine dress uniform pressed to perfection despite the years since he'd last worn it. His left arm hung paralyzed at his side, a lifelong reminder of the sacrifice he made on a battlefield far from home. In his right hand, he held an American flag folded against his chest like a promise kept. He was a 4-star general, a hero, a father. But none of that mattered the moment he stepped through the school doors. 4 security guards rushed toward him without pause, no questions asked, no respect shown. "Sir, you need to leave," one barked as another reached for the flag. "You can't. Be here." One grabbed him by the neck, treating him like a criminal instead of a patriot. The man didn't fight. He stood steady, eyes calm, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. The students in the hallway slowed to a stop. Phones were raised, whispers started, but no one moved, until a voice rose from the far end of the corridor. "Take your hands off him. Now." An old police officer emerged from the crowd, walking with purpose. His uniform was faded but clean, his badge still shining. The silence parted for him like a tide. "You don't know who this man is, do you?" the officer said, stepping between the guards and the veteran. "This man bled for your freedom. He led men through fire while others hid behind desks. He's the reason this flag still flies." One of the guards stammered. "We didn't recognize. You didn't care to," the officer interrupted. "All you saw was the color of his skin, not the courage in his step, not the medals on his chest." The flag in the old Marine's hand trembled, not from weakness, but from emotion. The crowd was frozen, then began to stir. A student clapped, then another, then the entire hallway erupted in applause. The daughter appeared at the top of the stairs, tears pouring down her face as she ran to her father and embraced him with both arms wrapped tight around his waist. The guards backed away, ashamed. And just like that, the American flag wasn't just a symbol, it was a witness. A witness to ignorance, to honor, to justice reclaimed. The old man stood tall again, surrounded by students who now saw him for what he truly was. Not a stranger, not a threat, but a living embodiment of service and sacrifice. He didn't come to be honored, but he left with the school standing in his honor. He stood just beyond the school gates, the morning sun casting a gentle glow on the silver strands in his closely cropped hair. His right hand clutched the American flag against his chest, and his uniform, creased and adorned with medals that spoke of war, of valor, of unspeakable sacrifice, held a quiet dignity. His left arm, once strong, now hung limp at his side, paralyzed from a mission no one at this school had ever heard of. He wasn't here for a ceremony. He wasn't here for attention. He was here for his daughter, a young honor student who didn't yet know her father had made it back to see her moment of pride. As he walked toward the main building, his boots clicked softly against the concrete. But before he could reach the front doors, 4 security guards approached, faces already hard, their minds already made up. They didn't see a veteran. They didn't see a father. They saw a black man in a uniform and assumed the worst. One of them stepped forward and barked, "You can't come in here!" Another grabbed him by the neck. The flag nearly slipped from his grasp. "What's your business here?" one snapped, not noticing the 4 stars gleaming under the lapel, or the faint scar that traced his temple, a souvenir from saving lives. The students nearby stopped mid-conversation, staring. Phones began to lift, fingers hovering over record buttons. The veteran didn't resist. He stood still, letting them dishonor him without a single word. Then came a voice, aged but firm, from the top of the steps. "Unhand that man. Right now." An old police officer, retired maybe, but still wearing his badge like a second skin, descended. Slowly, his eyes never leaving the face of the veteran. He limped slightly, but his presence was unwavering. "Do you even know who this is?" he asked the guards. "This man isn't just a Marine. He's a 4-star general. He's walked through gunfire so you wouldn't have to. That arm? Paralyzed?
Because he threw himself over a wounded soldier. That flag, earned with every drop of blood he left behind." The guards hesitated, backing away, their hands falling. One whispered an apology. The police officer didn't look at them.
His eyes were locked with the general's, and the silence between them was filled with unspoken stories only warriors understand. A door opened. A girl stepped out. Her eyes widened, and in one heartbeat she screamed, "Daddy!" and sprinted. Across the courtyard, she flung herself into his good arms, sobbing into his chest. He dropped the flag just long enough to hold her. Students began clapping. Teachers emerged from classrooms, stunned. One of them dropped their clipboard. The principal, red-faced, stumbled out behind them, unsure what to say. But the old Marine didn't need words. He just walked into the building, hand in hand with his daughter, the crowd parting in silence and awe. And though he came quietly, by the time he left, The entire school had learned a lesson louder than any textbook could ever teach. Respect should never depend on recognition, because the man they tried to push away was the very reason the flag still flew above their heads. He didn't come to be seen. He came because his daughter had earned this moment. The hallway smelled like floor wax and fresh bulletin boards, lockers clanged, and the loudspeaker crackled with morning announcements. But when the old man stepped inside, everything changed. He moved slowly, his back straight despite the pain etched deep into every joint. A 4-star general, a Marine, a father. His left arm hung useless at his side, the cost of a battlefield decision that saved lives. In his right hand, he carried an American flag, folded with care, the stars peeking over his fingers like the memory of every brother he'd lost. His medals gleamed under the fluorescent lights, not for vanity, but for truth. He'd come through war zones and decades of silence to watch his daughter receive her honors. He didn't want applause, just a seat in the back. But the moment the guards saw him, everything twisted. "Sir, you can't be here," said one, already walking fast. Before the general could speak, 2 of them closed in. One reached out, yanked the flag, the other grabbed his shoulder, and then, without shame, one clamped a hand around his neck. The old man didn't resist. His eyes, sharp as ever, didn't blink. He wasn't surprised, just disappointed. The crowd of students went still. Some whispered, some lifted phones. One girl gasped and whispered, "Isn't that?" Then came a voice. "Let him go, now." An older man stepped forward. Retired police, his face leathered from years of knowing right from wrong. His hand hovered over the badge clipped to his belt. He didn't raise his voice, but the tone cut through the air like a blade. "Take your hands off that man," he said again, slow and deliberate. The guards froze. The officer approached. "That man is a decorated Marine, 4-star general. Fought in wars you've only seen in textbooks. That paralyzed arm. He earned that defending a base full of soldiers, including 2 who now sit in Congress." The guards released their grip. One mumbled, "We didn't know." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You didn't care to know." Then, like a miracle timed with grace, she appeared. A young black girl in a white blouse and honor cords, coming down the hallway in a rush. Her eyes widened as she saw him. "Daddy?" she called out. The old man's posture didn't waver, but tears gathered at the edges of his eyes. She ran and wrapped herself around him, clutching his waist like she'd never let go again. The flag was pressed between them. A teacher clapped, then a student. Then the whole hallway thundered with applause, not out of pity, but out of realization. They had tried to throw away a living monument to everything their freedom stood for, say. Principal came running, stammering apologies. The general said nothing. He didn't need to. He walked into the gym, flanked by his daughter and the retired officer, while the guards watched, silent and small. That day's lesson wasn't in the textbooks. It stood tall, wore stars, carried a flag, and reminded them all. Sometimes history walks into the room quietly, until it's forced to speak. He walked through the front doors of the school with purpose, not pride. His boots tapped softly against the polished tile, the echo of each step barely rising above the hum of morning chatter. His dress blues were spotless, lined with ribbons and medals that told a story no one in that building had ever heard. His left arm hung limp, useless since the ambush that almost took his life, but didn't take his will. In his right arm, he carried an American flag folded tight against his chest, like a sacred vow. He didn't ask for fanfare. He didn't need a spotlight. He just wanted to see his daughter. But before he could even reach the auditorium doors, 4 security guards closed in. "Sir, you need to leave." The words hit like shrapnel, cold, clipped, automatic. One grabbed his shoulder. Another snatched at the flag. Then a hand closed around his neck. He didn't yell. He didn't push. Back. He had seen worse in places that didn't exist on maps. But the silence in the hallway grew loud. Students stopping, staring, their conversations cut off mid-sentence. Some began recording, most just watched, confused, unsure why an old man in uniform was being treated like a criminal. Then came the sound of old leather soles on the floor. "Let him go," said a voice. Aged, firm, and full of authority, all heads turned. A retired police officer, still carrying the weight of justice in his stance, stepped forward. His hands didn't tremble. His voice didn't rise. He just pointed at the man the guards were restraining. "Do you have any idea who this is?" The guards hesitated. "This man is a United States Marine, 4-star general, paralyzed in combat, served in operations you couldn't pronounce. He didn't just fight for the flag. He is the reason that flag still means something." One guard stammered, "We didn't know." "You didn't want to know," the officer shot back. The silence was broken by a cry. "Dad!" A girl in a white sash and graduation gown came running from the gym doors, her heels clicking fast against the tile. Her face crumbled when she saw him, her strong, quiet father, being manhandled in the school where she was about to be honored. She rushed into his arms, almost knocking the flag from his hand. The crowd erupted. Applause, tears, shame. The guards stepped back, heads low. A teacher wiped their eyes. The principal came rushing in, too late and too nervous. The old general didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply straightened his shoulders, lifted the flag, took his daughter's hand, and walked into that gym like a man returning to battle. And this time, the crowd followed. This time, they stood for him. Not because he asked, but because they finally understood. He didn't belong to the past. He was standing right there in the flesh now. The doors swung open as the old black Marine stepped into the school, his uniform crisp, shoes polished, chest lined with medals earned through grit and blood. His left arm, paralyzed, a permanent gift from the battlefield, rested stiff at his side, while his right hand clutched a tightly folded American flag. His steps were slow but firm. He wasn't a visitor. He wasn't a guest. He was a father. He came to see his daughter, but he barely made it 10 feet inside before 4 security guards intercepted him like he was trespassing. "Stop right there. Sir, you can't be here." "Let go of the flag." Then one of them grabbed his neck. The hallway froze. Laughter died. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Phones came out. Some kids looked confused, others shocked. But the guards didn't notice any of it. They didn't see the war behind the man's eyes. They didn't see the stars on his collar. They saw his skin. They saw his limp. They saw what they wanted to see, and nothing more. Until another voice cut through the air like a knife. "Get your hands off that man." Everyone turned. It was an old police officer, retired but not forgotten. His posture was stiff, a limp in one leg, but his eyes burned with fury. He pushed past the crowd and came right up to the guards, pointing a trembling but commanding finger. "Do you have any idea who you're manhandling?" he growled. "That man's a 4-star Marine general. He didn't just wear that flag. He defended it. Bled for it. Watched brothers die for it. And you treat him like a criminal?" One of the guards let go immediately, backing away. "We didn't know." The officer's eyes flared. "You didn't ask. That's the problem." The Marine stood, tall again, adjusting the flag, silent and composed. Then, through the gym doors, a girl appeared, her eyes wide, hand over her mouth. "Dad?" She ran, heels echoing down the floor, graduation sash bouncing over her shoulder. She wrapped her arms around him and didn't let go. Her tears soaked his ribbons. His flag pressed between them like an oath never broken. The crowd was silent. Then, a single clap broke out. Another followed. Then more, and more. Until the entire hallway rang with thunderous applause, not for a celebrity, not for a principal, but for a father, for a warrior, for a man nearly turned away from his own child's greatest day. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He walked side by side with his daughter into the gymnasium, shoulders back, head high, and this time, no one stopped him. They opened the doors for him. They stood, and they learned. Inside the gymnasium, banners fluttered gently overhead, and a hush rippled across the bleachers as word of what had just happened began to spread like wildfire. The principal, mid-sentence at the podium, faltered as the back doors creaked open. Every head turned, and then they saw him, the old black Marine, paralyzed arm pinned to his side, medals flashing under the lights, flag still clutched to his chest, walked in with his daughter at his side. Not one step uncertain, not one apology on his lips. Only truth in his presence. The student body, the faculty, even the parents in the front rows rose to their feet without being told. Some clapped. Others simply placed their hands over their hearts. It wasn't rehearsed. It was instinct. The principal cleared his throat, stunned. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have just been joined by a very, very special guest." But the old man didn't head toward the VIP seats. He didn't sit near the stage. He quietly chose a spot at the very back, just like he'd planned, because he didn't come to be seen. He came to see. His daughter took the stage minutes later, still blinking back tears. She was supposed to read a prepared speech, something about hard work, dreams, and thank yous. But instead, she paused, turned to the crowd, and said into the microphone, "My father wasn't supposed to be here today, but he came anyway, because that's what he's always done. He shows up, even when no one wants him to, even when people try to stop him. He shows up, for his country, for strangers, and most of all, for me. So if anyone's still wondering what a real hero looks like, he's sitting right there," she pointed toward the back. Everyone turned, and for the second time that day, the entire gymnasium stood. The Marine didn't cry. He simply nodded. Once. That was enough. After the ceremony, students lined up, many of them strangers to him, just to shake his hand. Some asked for a photo, others just said thank you. One boy, barely 16, wearing torn sneakers and eyes full of questions, whispered, "I didn't know people like you existed." The general looked at him, voice steady. "People like me are everywhere, but sometimes you have to open your eyes to see us." Outside, the same guards who had grabbed him by the neck hours earlier now stood off to the side, red-faced, silent. The retired officer who had intervened walked over to them and said, "You'll carry that mistake for the rest of your life. Make sure you use it to treat the next man better." As the sun dipped behind the flagpole, the Marine helped his daughter into the passenger seat of his old pickup truck, paint-chipped, engine loud, but dependable, like him. Before climbing, and he looked back once more at the school, the flag still in his hand. He didn't salute. He didn't wave. He just stood there, proud, quiet. A monument of flesh and spirit. Because on this day, without firing a shot, without giving a speech, without demanding respect, he taught everyone in that building something no textbook ever could, what it truly means to serve, and what it really means to stand. Back in the truck, his daughter sat in silence, wiping away the last of her tears. She kept glancing over at him, as if trying to make sense of how the man who'd tucked her into bed with bedtime stories was the same man who had once led soldiers through fire, the same man almost tossed aside like a trespasser. "Does it always feel like this?" she finally asked. He looked at her, calm. "What do you mean? To give so much and still be treated like you don't belong?" He didn't answer right away. He shifted the flag gently onto the dashboard, letting the setting sun kiss its edges. "It used to hurt more," he said finally. "But I learned a long time ago, the world doesn't owe you thanks. It doesn't have to see you, but you stand. Anyway, because you know who you are." She nodded, understanding deeper than ever before. As they pulled away from the school, students still lingered outside. Some waved, others stood quietly, as if waiting for a second chance to say what they hadn't. A small group of teachers approached the truck as it idled at the curb. One, the history teacher, placed a hand on her chest and said softly, "Sir, you've changed this school more in one afternoon than any textbook ever did." He nodded. "Then I did my job twice." Another guard, one of the four who had grabbed him earlier, stepped forward. His voice shook. "I didn't see you clearly. I'm sorry." The general didn't reply with anger. He simply said, "Then make sure the next man you see isn't wearing a uniform to be believed. Believe him because he's human." And with that, he rolled up the window and drove off into the fading orange sky, his daughter beside him, the flag glowing on the dash. At the school, a plaque would soon be hung, quietly and without press, with his name and rank next to the flagpole. Not because he asked, but because a school finally understood that greatness doesn't always come in the spotlight. Sometimes it walks in slowly, paralyzed on one side, holding a flag, and leaves a nation standing in its wake. The ending of this story reminds us that true honor doesn't demand attention. It simply stands tall, even when ignored, disrespected, or pushed aside. The old black Marine didn't raise his voice, yet his quiet presence taught a loud lesson. Dignity doesn't fade with age, and respect isn't earned by the uniform alone, but by the life lived behind it. The story challenges us to see beyond assumptions, beyond appearances, beyond skin. It shows that recognition often comes too late, but it must still come. It's a call to listen, to look again, and to never let our bias blind us to the greatness standing right in front of us. In the end, the man didn't need applause. He just needed his place. And now, no one who saw him will ever forget that he earned it.